I still remember the exact moment when I confirmed the wire transfer. $12 million Canadian. The culmination of 38 years building Northridge Manufacturing from a single machine shop in Mississauga to one of the largest aerospace parts suppliers in Ontario. My phone buzzed with the confirmation as I stood in the private dining room at Canoe, 74 floors above Toronto's financial district. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the CN Tower piercing the autumn sky, Lake Ontario stretching beyond like hammered silver. My daughter Sarah had insisted on organizing this celebration dinner. Just family, she'd said. Intimate, special. I'd agreed, touched by her enthusiasm. It had been years since we'd all sat down together like this. Sarah, her husband Derek, and surprisingly, my ex-wife Margaret, whom Sarah had somehow convinced to attend, despite the fact that we hadn't spoken directly in almost 5 years. I tucked my phone away and returned to the table, where a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2010 was breathing. Derek had ordered it, making a show of discussing vintages with the sommelier. My son-in-law had always been performative like that, everything carefully staged. He worked in private equity, or so he claimed. I'd never quite understood what he actually did, despite him explaining it to me half a dozen times using words like arbitrage and fund restructuring. "Dad, you're glowing," Sarah said as I sat down. She looked beautiful in a navy dress, her mother's eyes, my stubborn chin. 34 years old, and I could still see the little girl who used to wait by the window for me to come home from the shop. "It's done," I said simply. "Northridge is officially no longer mine." Derek raised his water glass. "To new beginnings. And to smart exits. 12 million is incredible for a manufacturing company in this market." Something in his tone bothered me. Too familiar with the numbers. Too casual. But I pushed the thought aside. Sarah had probably told him. Of course she had. They were married. Margaret spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. "Robert, I hope you've thought about proper wealth management. That's a significant sum to manage." I met her cool gaze. "I've been managing just fine for 63 years, Margaret." "I'm sure you have." She smiled. That precise smile I remembered from our divorce proceedings. "I'm simply saying that Derek has connections. He could introduce you to some excellent advisors." Actually, Derek leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I've been meaning to talk to you about exactly that, Robert. There's a fund I'm involved with, very exclusive. Minimum investment is usually 10 million, but I could get you in. The returns are exceptional, 18 to 22% annually. Red flag number 1. I'd been in business long enough to know that guaranteed returns like that were either illegal or imaginary. But before I could respond, our server arrived with the first course. His name tag read James, and he looked young, mid-20s, with the careful posture of someone who took his job seriously. "Seared scallops with butternut squash puree," James announced, placing plates before us with practiced precision. As he set mine down, he hesitated for just a fraction of a second, his eyes meeting mine with what I thought was concern. But then he moved on to Sarah, and I decided I'd imagined it. The scallops were perfect. We ate in relative silence, the kind that felt more tense than comfortable. Sarah kept glancing between Derek and me, her fingers worrying the stem of her wine glass. Margaret picked at her food with the delicate distaste she'd always shown when she wasn't genuinely hungry but felt obligated to participate. "How's the shelter, Sarah?" I asked, trying to steer conversation to safer ground. My daughter volunteered at a women's shelter in Parkdale, one of the few things about her life that I knew she was truly passionate about. Her face brightened. "It's good. Actually, we're running a fundraiser next month. I was hoping you might." She stopped, glanced at Derek, then continued quieter. "Well, I know you've always supported the shelter." "Of course I will," I said. "Whatever you need." Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sarah, we talked about this. Your father just made a major transition. Maybe give him some breathing room before hitting him up for donations." "I'm not hitting him up for anything," Sarah said, a flash of anger crossing her face. "The shelter matters to me." "I know, babe. I'm just saying, timing." I watched this exchange carefully. Marriage, I had learned from my own failed one, was all about the spaces between words, the things left unsaid. And right now, The space between my daughter and her husband felt colder than the October wind off the lake. Our mains arrived. I'd ordered the venison, rare. As James placed it before me, he leaned in slightly and murmured, "Sir, would you mind stepping to the host stand for a moment? There's a question about your reservation." I frowned. "A question? We've been seated for 40 minutes. "I apologize, sir. It will just take a moment." His eyes were insistent, urgent even. Margaret made a dismissive sound. Honestly, the service here used to be impeccable. I excused myself and followed James past the bar to a quiet corner near the coat check. He turned to face me, his professional composure cracking. "Mr. Holloway, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not react visibly," he said quietly. "I'm a third-year medical student at U of T. I work here weekends to pay tuition. When I was preparing your daughter's place setting, I saw her pour something into your wine glass. White powder from a small vial. She was very careful, but I happened to be approaching from her blind side. My heart stopped, then restarted, hammering. What? I don't know what it was, but given the secrecy and the method, I don't think it was sugar, sir. Your wine is the Chateau Margaux. Yes? Red, room temperature, in the large Bordeaux glass?" I nodded, unable to speak. "I would strongly suggest not drinking it. I'd be happy to have it spilled accidentally. Or, no." My mind was racing, trying to process this information and failing. "Sarah? My daughter? No, if what you're saying is true, I need to know for certain." James looked conflicted. "Sir, I understand, but if I'm right, can you identify what it was, if I gave you the glass?" "Possibly. I have access to the teaching hospital's lab. I could run a basic screening." He paused. "But sir, if this is what I think it is, you should contact the police." "Not yet. Not until I know. I couldn't believe it. Wouldn't believe it. There had to be another explanation. If I somehow got the glass to you after dinner, could you test it tonight?" "Yes. I'm here until midnight, then I was planning to study at the hospital anyway." He pulled out his phone. "Here, take my number. But please, Mr. Holloway, be careful." I returned to the table, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. Sarah looked up, smiled. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Fine. Just a small mix-up with the bill." I forced myself to smile back, to sit down, to pick up my fork. My wine glass sat there, innocent, waiting. Derek was in the middle of a story about a recent trip to Banff, something about hiking and wildlife. I wasn't listening. I was watching Sarah, my daughter, who had, according to a stranger, just tried to poison me. Unless the stranger was lying, unless this was some kind of elaborate scam. But what would be the point? James had asked for nothing, warned me of nothing except to avoid my own wine. Margaret excused herself to the restroom. The moment she was gone, Derek's demeanor shifted. He leaned toward me, his voice dropping. "Robert, I want to be direct with you. The fund I mentioned? I need you to commit tonight. The opportunity closes Monday, and honestly, with the kind of returns we're talking about, every day you wait is money left on the table. Derek, I haven't even looked at any documentation. I can email everything to you right now. Sign the papers, wire the funds Monday morning, and by this time next year, you'll have added another $2 million to your net worth. Maybe more." Sarah returned from the table just as Margaret came back from the restroom. Had they coordinated that? Was I losing my mind? Seeing conspiracies and everything? "Derek, please," Sarah said softly. "Not tonight. Your father is a businessman, Sarah. He understands opportunity." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She seemed exhausted, dark circles under expertly applied makeup, thinner than I remembered from our last dinner 3 months ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Sarah," I said gently, "are you all right? You seem tired." She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Derek, then back at me. "I'm fine, Dad. Just been busy with the shelter and everything." "And the gambling debts," Derek said casually, cutting his steak. "Tell him about those, babe." Sarah's face went white. "Derek, what gambling debts?" I demanded. "It's nothing," Sarah said quickly. "It's handled." "Derek, why would you—" "Your father deserves to know where his family stands financially," Derek said, that same casual tone. Sarah here developed a bit of a poker habit. Online mostly. Racked up about 40,000 before I found out and shut it down. $40,000. Sarah, my careful, thoughtful daughter who used to save her allowance in a piggy bank shaped like a turtle. Sarah, why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because it's embarrassing, Dad. And it's handled. I'm in a program. I'm dealing with it. A program that costs money, Derek added. Therapy, group sessions, but again, handled. We're managing. Though obviously if you wanted to help your daughter get back on her feet, I'm sure she'd appreciate it. Wouldn't you, babe? Sarah's eyes were shining with tears. I don't want his money, Derek. I told you that. Of course you don't. But facts are facts. Derek took a sip of his wine, my wine glass still untouched in front of me. Robert, I'm going to be blunt. Sarah and I are in a bit of a financial bind. The gambling thing, yes, but also some investments I made that didn't pan out. I was really counting on that fund placement fee from getting you invested. It would have solved a lot of problems for us. There it was, the ask. The reason for this dinner, Margaret spoke up. Derek, this is hardly appropriate dinner conversation. Why not? Derek's voice had an edge now, something sharp underneath. Robert's sitting on $12 million. His daughter needs help. Seems pretty straightforward to me. I'm happy to help Sarah, I said carefully. But I'm not investing $10 million into a fund I know nothing about to do it. Even if it would help your daughter? Derek! Sarah stood up abruptly. I need some air. Excuse me. She walked quickly toward the restrooms, and I started to rise to follow her, but Margaret touched my arm. You two discuss business. She followed Sarah, leaving Derek and me alone at the table. Derek's facade dropped entirely. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're not going to invest, are you? No. Pity. Would have made things easier. He picked up my wine glass, the one I hadn't touched, and held it up to the light. This is really excellent wine. $2,000 a bottle, did you know that? Seems wasteful not to drink it. My blood ran cold. Then drink it yourself if you care so much. He smiled. Maybe I will. He brought the glass to his lips, and I experienced a moment of pure vertigo. If James was right, if there was something in that wine, and if Derek drank it, but Derek just held it there, his eyes on mine. Or maybe you should. Toast to family, to new beginnings, to trust. I'm not much of a wine drinker. No? He set the glass down. Pity. Sarah went through such trouble selecting it. The words hung between us. Such trouble. Selection involved careful choice, careful preparation. What did you do to my daughter? I asked quietly. Derek's smile widened. I married her, Robert. I gave her stability, social connections, opportunities. All I asked in return was that she help me occasionally with certain financial arrangements. But Sarah got soft, started talking about therapy, about programs, about being honest with Daddy. He said the last word with contempt, so I had to motivate her differently. The gambling debts weren't really hers, were they? But try proving that when her name is on the accounts, when the casinos have her ID on file. Addiction is such a nasty thing, so hard to overcome. Sometimes it even drives people to desperate measures. He gestured to the wine glass. Tragically desperate measures. I couldn't breathe. You're saying, Sarah, I'm not saying anything that could be proven in court. I'm simply noting that you have a glass of very expensive wine growing warm in front of you, and it would be a shame to waste it, especially when Sarah worked so hard. He checked his watch. She should be back from the restroom soon. Margaret, too. We should probably wrap this up. My mind raced. James had seen Sarah pour something. Derek was all but admitting to forcing her into it. But why? If I died, Sarah would inherit, but she and Derek were already married. Unless. You need the money immediately, I realized. You can't wait for an inheritance. You're in debt. Real debt. The kind that comes with consequences. Derek's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw real fear underneath. Drink the wine, Robert. Or don't. But know that if you make a scene, if you call the police, if you do anything except finish this nice family dinner and go home quietly, I will make sure Sarah takes the fall for everything. I have emails, text messages, evidence that she planned this entirely on her own. Desperate daughter, gambling debts, father who wouldn't help her. It writes itself. I would never believe that, but a court might. And even if they didn't, even if you hired the best lawyers in Canada to defend her, the trial would destroy her. Is that what you want for your daughter? To watch her on the stand, testifying about her addiction, her desperation, her attempt to murder her own father? I stared at this man, this stranger wearing an expensive suit and a familiar face. What do you want? Wire me $10 million Monday morning. I'll give you account details. Tell everyone it's an investment. In 6 months, I'll declare the fund bankrupt. You'll lose most of it, and I'll be somewhere warm without extradition. Sarah never needs to know you knew. She can live the rest of her life thinking she almost made a terrible mistake, but that Daddy never drank the wine, that nothing happened, that she can recover and move forward. And if I refuse? Then you drink the wine, or I make sure Sarah's fingerprints are the only ones on the vial that I'll anonymously tip the police about. Your choice. The women were returning. I could see them crossing the restaurant, Sarah's face blotchy from crying, Margaret walking beside her with a hand on her back. I looked at the wine glass, at Derek, at my daughter approaching, and I made my decision. James, I called to our server, who was passing nearby. I'm terribly sorry, but I've been clumsy. I reached for the wine glass, and as I did, I let my elbow knock into my water glass. It toppled, ice water flooding across the white tablecloth, cascading toward the edge of the table. In the chaos of James and another server rushing over with napkins, in Derek's instinctive lean back to avoid the water, in Margaret's gasp of surprise, I did something I'd learned 38 years ago in a machine shop when you needed to mark your tools. I scratched a tiny mark on the base of my wine glass with my thumbnail. Then, in the confusion of servers dabbing at the water, of Derek standing up to avoid getting wet, of fresh napkins being laid down and glasses being repositioned, I switched my marked glass with Sarah's identical one. It took 3 seconds. No one noticed. Sarah and Margaret reached the table just as everything was being sorted. Oh no, what happened? Sarah asked. Just a spill, I said. Nothing serious. Please sit. Dessert arrived. A chocolate mousse that I couldn't taste. Derek kept glancing at my wine glass, the one I still hadn't touched. The one that was now Sarah's, though he didn't know it. Dad, you haven't had any wine, Sarah noted. Don't you like it? Actually, I've decided I'd prefer the 2015 Brunello, I said to James, who had returned to check on us. Could you bring me a glass of that instead? And perhaps refresh everyone else's drinks? Of course, sir. As James gathered glasses, including my untouched Margot with its tiny scratch on the base, Derek's face showed the first sign of real concern, but he couldn't object without revealing too much. Margaret raised her new wine when it arrived. A toast, she said, to Robert's new chapter. We all raised our glasses, all except Sarah, who suddenly looked very pale. I don't feel well, she said quietly. Babe, we just got dessert, Derek said, but there was an edge of panic in his voice now. No, I really don't feel well. I think I need to. Sarah stood up, swayed, and sat back down hard. Dad, I feel really strange. Derek's face had gone from confident to ashen. Sarah, what did you drink? Just water. And she looked at her wine glass, confusion crossing her face. The Margot. Why? How much? I don't know, a few sips? Derek, what's wrong? Why do you look like that? I was already signaling James. Call an ambulance. Now. Sir? My daughter has been poisoned. Call 911 immediately. The restaurant erupted into controlled chaos. James was on the phone. Other diners were staring. A manager appeared, and Derek tried to run. He made it 3 steps before I grabbed his arm. 63 years old, but 38 of them spent in a machine shop, and I still had a grip like a vice. You're not going anywhere, I said. Let go of me. You did this. You told her to poison me, and she drank it instead. Margaret had gone white. Robert, what are you talking about? Ask him. Ask your son-in-law what he put in Sarah's wine, the wine that was supposed to be mine. Sarah was crying now, confused and terrified. Dad, I don't understand. Derek, what is he talking about? Derek's face twisted with rage and fear. You switched the glasses. You knew. A young server saw what Sarah did and warned me. I didn't want to believe it. But then you told me everything, didn't you? Threatened my daughter. Tried to blackmail me. Sarah did this herself. I have proof. Then why are you running? I tightened my grip. Why aren't you calling an ambulance for your wife? Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Police came shortly after. Sarah was conscious but disoriented, her pupils dilated, her pulse rapid. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, she grabbed my hand. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He said if I didn't do it, he'd hurt me. He said you'd never know, that it would just look like a heart attack. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't want to." "I know, sweetheart. I know. We'll fix this." Derek was in handcuffs, screaming about his rights, about false accusations. Margaret stood frozen, watching everything crumble. James approached me quietly. "Mr. Holloway, I have your wine glass, the one with your mark. I'll make sure the police get it for testing." "Thank you, son. You saved my life. Maybe my daughter's too." "I'm just glad I was paying attention, sir." The police wanted statements. I gave mine clearly, methodically, including Derek's confession, his blackmail attempt, everything. I showed them the texts I'd recorded on my phone during dessert, making notes of what he'd said. They took Margaret in for questioning, too. She'd met with Derek 3 times in the past 2 weeks, supposedly without Sarah's knowledge. Bank records would later show she'd loaned him $80,000 that she didn't have, borrowed against her condo. The wine tested positive for a compound called ricin, derived from castor beans, lethal in small doses. Traceable to a dark web purchase made from Derek's laptop, though he'd been smart enough to use Sarah's credit card. Sarah survived. Barely. She'd only had a few sips, and the medical team at St. Michael's Hospital worked through the night. James called in favors, got specialists involved, sat with me in the waiting room, even though his shift had ended hours ago. "Why are you still here?" I asked him, around 3 a.m. He shrugged, tired. Seemed wrong to leave. "Besides, I should probably make sure you're okay too. You've had a hell of a night, Mr. Holloway." "Call me Robert." James Chen. He held out his hand, and I shook it. 3rd-year med school, like I said, specializing in toxicology, actually, which is probably the only reason I recognized ricin exposure symptoms. "You're going to be a hell of a doctor, James." "I'm trying. Medical school's expensive, though, even with student loans. I'm looking at about $200,000 in debt by the time I graduate." I didn't say anything then, just filed that information away. Sarah spent 2 weeks in the ICU, another month in recovery. The therapy was brutal, both physical and psychological. Ricin damages kidneys, liver, causes neurological issues. She'd had a small enough dose that she'd survive, but recovery would be long. Derek was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. The investigation uncovered he wasn't actually employed in private equity at all. He was a professional con artist who'd been working scams across Ontario for 6 years, targeting wealthy families through their children. He'd married Sarah specifically to get access to me. The gambling debts were real, but they were his, not hers. He'd used her identity, forged documents, created a paper trail to make her look like an addict while he was the one spiraling into debt from actual casino habits and bad investments. Margaret had been his secondary plan. If Sarah wouldn't cooperate, he'd been working on my ex-wife, playing on her resentment of me, her own financial troubles after a series of bad relationships. She hadn't known about the poison, but she'd known Derek was planning some kind of financial scheme, and she'd agreed to help him pressure me into the fake investment. She pled guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and got 2 years probation plus restitution. Our daughter, lying in a hospital bed, told me she didn't want me to forgive her mother, and I didn't. Derek got 15 years. He'd probably served 10 with good behavior. Not enough, in my opinion, but the Crown Attorney said we were lucky to get that much given that I wasn't actually harmed. "But my daughter nearly died," I'd protested. "Because she voluntarily put poison in a glass, sir. Even if she was coerced, even if she was threatened, the defense will argue she had agency. The fact that you switched the glasses and she drank it herself, it complicates the case. So 15 years. Derek would be 53 when he got out. still young enough to reinvent himself. I sold Northridge Manufacturing, but I never stopped working. 3 months after Sarah was released from the hospital, I started a foundation, the Holloway Second Chances Foundation, focused on addiction recovery, domestic abuse victims, and people escaping coercive relationships. Sarah became the director once she was well enough. She'd been through all of it firsthand, and she was determined that her terrible experience wouldn't be wasted. She threw herself into the work with a passion I remembered from when she was young, when she believed she could change the world. I funded the foundation with $5 million of the 12. Another $1 million went to establishing a scholarship program at University of Toronto's medical school, specifically for students in financial need studying toxicology or emergency medicine. The first recipient was James Chen. He came to my office when he got the news, knocked hesitantly on the door. I'd moved into a smaller place in Liberty Village, something manageable, with a view of the lake. Mr. Holloway, Robert, I don't know what to say. Say, you'll finish your degree and help people. That's all I ask. This is a full ride. Tuition, living expenses, everything. Medical school is expensive, you said so yourself. Consider it repayment. You saved my life, James. This seems the least I could do. You didn't have to do this. No, I agreed. But I wanted to. My whole career, I built machines. Useful things, necessary things. But they were just objects. This foundation, this scholarship, helping my daughter heal, helping young doctors like you succeed. This feels different. This feels like building something that matters. James's eyes were wet. It does matter. More than you know. I was about to drop out, actually. The debt was crushing me. I was working here, working another job, barely sleeping. I didn't know how I'd make it through. Now you don't have to worry about that. Just focus on becoming the doctor you're meant to be. He graduated 2 years later, top of his class in toxicology. He now works at Toronto General Hospital's Poison Control Center and lectures at the medical school. He still sends me updates every few months. Got engaged last year to another doctor he met during his residency. I'm invited to the wedding. Sarah and I have dinner every Sunday. Sometimes at Canoe, reclaiming the space where everything almost ended. She's 3 years sober from the manipulation and abuse, though she still sees a therapist weekly. She's dating someone new, a social worker she met through the foundation, someone kind, someone patient, someone who makes her laugh. I'm taking it slow this time, Dad, she told me last Sunday over pancakes. Slow is good. I'm sorry I didn't see what Derek was. I'm sorry her voice broke. Hey. I covered her hand with mine. You were a victim. He was a predator. That's not on you. I put poison in your wine, Dad. I don't know if I can forgive myself for that. Then let me forgive you, and maybe eventually you'll believe you deserve it. She cried, and I held her hand, and we sat there in the morning sunlight, filtering through the restaurant windows, two people who'd survived something terrible, and were slowly, carefully, learning how to trust again. The foundation has helped 87 people so far. We're small, focused, deliberate. Each case gets personal attention, real resources, actual follow-up. It's not about the numbers, it's about the lives. I think about Derek sometimes, in prison in Kingston. I wonder if he has any regrets, any real understanding of what he did. Probably not. People like that rarely do. But mostly I think about second chances. About James, now Dr. Chen, saving lives because someone gave him an opportunity. About Sarah, rebuilding herself one day at a time, helping other women escape the same traps she fell into. About myself, learning that wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you do with it. I'm 66 now. My hair is fully white, and my knees complain when the weather changes. But I wake up each morning knowing that I'm doing something that matters. The machines I built for Northridge will eventually wear out, be replaced, be forgotten. But the foundation, the scholarships, the lives we've touched that ripples outward in ways I'll never fully see. Last month, I got a letter from a woman named Jennifer who'd gone through our program. She'd been in an abusive relationship, been coerced into financial crimes by her partner, nearly destroyed herself trying to escape. The foundation helped her get clean, get therapy, get legal help, get a fresh start. I have a job now, she wrote. A small apartment. My daughter lives with me again. I never thought I'd have any of this. Thank you for believing that people like me deserve a second chance. I keep that letter on my desk, next to a photo of Sarah at the Foundation's anniversary gala, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Next to my medical school graduation photo with James, both of us in suits, both of us grinning like idiots. These are the things I built that matter. Not machines, not buildings, not even a $12 million exit that seemed so important that October evening. Just people. Helping them, believing in them, giving them the chance that Derek tried to take from me, that Sarah almost lost, that James needed desperately. Second chances. That's what I build now. And business, I've discovered, has never been better.